that it's completely normal. Are all the P waves and QRSs associated with one another? You already started that because when you were looking at P waves, you were already looking to see that there was a one-to-one relationship, right? So this is just a confirmation that yes, indeed, all the P waves and QRSs are associated, or if they're not, you note that, okay? You're looking at what the entire complex is, that QRS complex. Did that entire complex, are the complexes right where they're supposed to be? Did they come before they were supposed to? Did they come after they were supposed to? If they came before they were supposed to, we call them premature. If they come after they were supposed to, we call them escapes. Okay? So normal, premature, or after. Or do we see that there's some problem with the QRS complex altogether that denotes something more, like a block? Don't get hung up on the blocks. Chandler, be quiet. Don't hang up on the blocks. We'll come back to them. Right now, you're just identifying normality or non-normality. Okay? We'll define them as we go. After you've identified where the QRS complex falls consistently, then you measure the QRS complex. And you identify if it is narrow or wide. I will force you, because I'm evaluating you, on coming up with exact measurements. But in the end, we actually don't care about the exact measurement. We care that the measurement is either within under a certain length or greater than a certain length. So is it narrow or wide? And that amount is what, do you think? What do you remember? What did we talk about?
2 boxes.
0.12.
What about 0.12?
It's less than 0.12 now, and wide if it's greater than 0.12. All right?
Close, but not quite. You're almost there. Anyone else? Can you clean up what he said because he's so close?
Narrow, less than or equal to 0.12 is narrow.
You guys need to combine yourself. You're not right, and you're not right, but you're both awful close. There's a number of different ways you'll see this, and I want to make sure you don't get confused with it. The true measurement is 0.11. And so how you'll either see that, you'll normally see that one of two ways. You'll either see it less than or equal to 0.10. That's often how you'll see it, because measuring 0.11 is very difficult. Or you'll see it as less than 0.12. Notice that it's not less than or equal to. So what you said was less than 0.12 or greater than 0.12. It's less than 0.12. If it is 0.12 or greater, it's wide.
Greater than or equal to.
Yeah. Okay? 0.12 would be how many boxes?
3.
3 boxes. Okay. Now I will tell you that a lot of times you find QRSs that are basically exactly 0.12. And then you're going, okay, but everything else is just right. So is that really wide? It is, but at the same time, it's not. There is a normal variant that can get it to about 0.12 and still be basically normal for them, especially if they've got heavy parasympathetic involvement. So there is a word that I want you guys to get familiar with, and that is borderline. You can use that word. Borderline always precedes a negative direction, a negative word. So it's not borderline normal, it is borderline abnormal. So it's not borderline narrow, it would be borderline wide. So if we have QRSs that are 0.12, you would not be counted wrong if you said they're wide, and you would not be counted wrong if you said they're borderline wide. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I would want you to recognize that in a lot of people, that borderline wideness could be normal for them, and it doesn't necessarily denote some of the problems we see with wide QRSs when it's right at 0.12. Okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. However, it's less than or equal to 0.10, and or less than 0.12. Those are two different ways that you'll see it written, depending on what book you happen to read, or what I might say. I'm sorry, I might switch back and forth based on what just happens to be in my head at that moment in time. I might say, yeah, the QRS needs to be less than 0.12. Or if I'm thinking 0.10 in my head, I'll always say less than or equal to 0.12. So listen to that.
You said it wrong.
Less than or equal to 0.10.
Yeah. You said less than or equal.
Less than or equal to 0.10, or just less than 0.12. Okay? I will not say what I just said.
Yeah.
And I won't even say it again to not confuse anyone else.
Oh, don't worry, we're gonna record it.
So, if they are a narrow QRS, if it's a narrow QRS, it means that the ventricles are firing because the AV node is working and the entire autorhythmic pathway is working. So if the QRS complex is narrow, the only way that it can be narrow is if the Purkinje system got the signal to do it. The only way the Purkinje system could do it is if both bundle branches gave it the signal at the same time. The only way that could happen is if the bundle of His delivered to the branches evenly. The only way that can happen is if the junction, the AV node and the bundle of His are working normally. I'm not saying anything that's coming up to that point, but from that point on, it has to be normal. So therefore, if we have a normal, narrow QRS, we absolutely can say that it is supraventricular. Supraventricular means what?
Above the ventricle.
Above the ventricles. So we have 4 rhythmogenic areas. Don't get hung up on words. It's medical terminology. Rhythmogenic means generated rhythms. Yes?
Yeah.
We have 4 places that the rhythm can be coming from. What's the number one spot that it has to be coming from? The SA node. So we call them sinus. If the sinus is wiped out, what's the next area that should take over?
AV.
Before that,
Junction.
Atrial pathways.
the atrial pathways. So we'd say something in the atria. If the atria fails, then what takes over?
AV.
The AV and bundle of His. So the junction. And if the junction fails, then what has to take over everything?
The ventricles.
The ventricles do. That's the line. These are supraventricular. This is ventricular. Does that make sense? If you have a narrow QRS complex, then that means the AV node is working. So it is at least coming from here. We have to do a little bit more work to find out if it's coming from here or here, but it's at least coming from here, which means it has to be supraventricular.
So sinus tach is therefore also supraventricular.
Absolutely. Because supraventricular is a catch-all of where it's coming from. Does that make sense? So you guys have learned supraventricular tachycardia in your HCLS stuff, right?
Yeah.
Supraventricular tachycardia is a catch-all term. Supraventricular tachycardia could be sinus tach, it could be atrial tach, and it could be junctional tach.
Which ones are we usually
It could
treating?
also be any number of different ones that come into these categories, which we'll talk about later. And it could also be in this form, atrial tach, AFib, or a flutter. So that can be broken up into a whole bunch of different categories, which we'll discuss those categories, but all of those are supraventricular and tachycardia, right? So it's a catch-all term.
Meaning we can't determine where the supraventricular signal is coming from,
Yes,
usually.
correct.
If you can.
We'll address that more when we get to the tachycardias. Okay, so if it's narrow, it's supraventricular. If it is wide, then it means, be careful with what I'm going to say here, if it's wide, then it means that the QRS complex is firing cell to cell. It's not firing through its autorhythmic cells, it's firing cell to cell. Okay? I'm very careful about how I say it. Okay? What I said was if it's narrow, it absolutely is supraventricular. If it is wide, it means it's going cell to cell. Okay? Y'all notice what I didn't say?
It comes from the ventricles?
That's what I didn't say.
Yeah.
And that's really important. If it's wide, that doesn't mean it's generated from the ventricles. Maybe it is, but it could also be supraventricular with some other problems.
Like Wolf Parkinson's that you were talking about?
No, I'm talking about other blocks that might be present. We'll discuss those down the road. What we can say is if it's narrow, it absolutely is supraventricular. And if it's wide, the cells are going cell to cell. The cells are firing cell to cell outside the autorhythmic cells for some reason. We have to define what those reasons are.
Are they typically in the ventricles?
No.
Is that why?
No, they're not typically there. They are sometimes, like in the case of ventricular tachycardia, VTAC, but that's not the only thing that will cause a wide rhythm in our QS complexes.
So for clarification on anatomy, the junction itself being the AV node and the bundle of his, when the bundle goes through the atrial, or the AV septum, does the Purkinje start at the start of the septum, or is
No, no, no. No, Purkinje cells don't start until after.
I'm sorry, we, misspoke. The right and left bundle branch, do they split right at the AV septum?
No,
Okay.
no, the bundle of his travels down the septum a short distance before it gets to a branching point.
So, I might have to shut up here. In the bundle, if it gets below the septum, but before the split, and there's a block there, is it still considered supraventricular?
Yes.
Even though it's technically in the ventricle at that point?
Yes,
Okay.
because it's part of the junction.
Okay.
And that's literally what we mean is, when we say above, in this case, we're not necessarily meaning literally above, we mean before you get to those contractile cells.
Okay.
So it could be all the way down to.
So think of it more figuratively above. In the hierarchy of cells, the ventricles are at the bottom of the hierarchy.
Sure.
It's above that hierarchy.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So when you say it's the cell-to-cell contact, you're talking about contractile cells. So it is possible that you could have the SA node fire correctly, starts getting down the pathways, and at some point there's a break there, and then from there on out, the contractile cells are transmitting the signal all the way down to the ventricle. Could it be passing that way?
I'm not sure I understood. Would you say that one more time?
So the AV node, or I'm sorry, SA node fires off,
Yes,
starts going down the pathways
Yes.
correctly, and then at some point there's a break there, and then your contractile cells are now taking over in the atrium and passing that message down through contraction.
no,
No?
because you have a septum in the way.
Okay, so that septum actually completely blocks any
Yes.
signal from coming down.
Except for the bundle of his.
Okay,
Listen, except for the bundle of his is the only conduit of electrical transmission from the atria to the ventricles.
okay.
The only one, except for in those rare patients that have a bypass tract.
Alright.
It is the only way. So if there's a block in that signal that stops it in the atria, then the ventricles would have to initiate their own signal.
Okay, so then the transmit from cell to cell, what exactly are you talking
In the
about?
ventricles.
So they're getting some sort of signal, at least partially down the bundle of his.
No, they could be starting their own.
Oh, or starting, oh, okay.
Yeah,
So they're
they could be starting their own.
Okay,
Yeah, it could be one of the cells in the ventricles that started being its own pacemaker.
okay.
That's a possibility.
Could the pathway start that, the bypass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Ask that again.
On the abnormality of a bypass that's going cell to cell, could that cell to cell, if there's a block?
Yes, those are autorhythmic cells as well. That's not commonly seen
Okay,
because they are more responsive to either the ventricles or the atria, but it is a possibility that it could start there. So we look for it to be narrow or wide. If it's narrow, it is absolutely supraventricular. If it's wide, we will have to do a little bit more investigation. And then we want to identify if they're grouped or not. So if we had a regularly irregular rhythm or an irregular rhythm, that's what we're talking about here. Do the QRS complexes come in a group? Do we have two QRS complexes and then no QRS complex, and then two QRS complexes and then no QRS complex, in which case they're grouped in twos, or they're grouped in fours, or they have some grouping to them, or it's completely irregular and there is no grouping to those QRSs. So we're looking to find out if we have some sort of grouping process. If we do, then we either have a block, a periodic block of some sort in the AV node, or we could have recurrent premature complexes. Premature complexes that keep coming more often, that create some sort of a pattern. And we'll discuss what that pattern are. So, do we have any dropped beats? Are there any QRS complexes not there that are supposed to be there? If there are,
A P wave without a QRS.
correct, you have a P wave without a QRS. That's right. If we have a P wave without a QRS, that's one possibility. It could be that we're missing both. It could be that there's supposed to be a P wave and a QRS, and they're both gone.
How do you distinguish that between just a slow rate?
Because you've got what's happening before and after. So you have
Would be considered-
regular, something is missing, back to regular. Then you ask yourself, okay, what just happened in this crap that I eliminated right at the beginning because it was different? Now I'm trying to define it. So if you're missing just the QRS complex, it could be an AV nodal block. If you're missing everything, it could be a sinus arrest. We'll define both of those, but if something is missing, there is some sort of a block of some sort. Where that block is depends on what's missing. We'll define those. We'll define what's missing and what we're going to name those. But we have to find out what's missing. Okay? Is that a question?
That was not a question.
Okay.
Just figure it's something that had absolutely nothing to do with this class.
Beautiful.
Other than the heart attack that we just got.
All right.
What are the new?
Or read the description outside of class. Don't be reading class.
Well, you read it during class.
See what you're saying,
That's cheap.
Naaman's almost had it.
Oops. So you're asking if P waves and QRS complexes follow a regular pattern or not. And if they don't, you're asking what is the difference? What is not right about how these P to P intervals and R to R intervals, how they're responding to each other? What's different about them? Okay? This takes into consideration a few things. So Annalisa talked about artifact right at the very beginning, right? Understand that if I have so this is my crap, right? What do I do with my crap?
Eliminate.
Throw it away.
I get rid of it, okay? And I'm looking at everything, and I notice that my P-to-P intervals here are the same. And I happen to note that over here, I have a P-to-P interval that's the same too. And I note that my R to R intervals are the same, where the crap's not. And I know that over here, I've got that same R to R interval. And then I go through and I just try, and I see that my calipers here are the same. My calipers here are the same. I told you if there's crap, what might you do?
Pretend it's not there.
Assume there's something normal there. So let's pretend it is. Let me put my calipers here, and there's supposed to be a P wave here. I don't see it, but let's pretend it is there. Let's continue to pretend it is there. So let's move my calipers as if it is there, and I see that there should be a P wave there. And then I pretend that there's one there, and I put my calipers here, and I'm right back on again. It means that my P waves were marching through the whole time. I did have P waves there as well. Otherwise, it would not have marched out. And I do the same thing with my R to Rs, and I know, hey, wow, my R to Rs actually match out completely all the way through this thing as well. Then I know that this activity is not related to the heart. That activity is something that's being superimposed on top of what the heart's doing underneath it. And in this case, I would say we're having artifact. The body's being bumped. They're shivering. They've got crackles in the respirations. They're in the ambulance and the 60-cycle engine is causing problems. That's not related to the body. Because I know that if this P wave didn't happen, if this were the body and this P wave were gone, then what would my QRS complex here be compared to this one?
Different.
Yeah, it wouldn't be at the same time. It wouldn't happen at the same time. if it's regular all the way through, and my beginning side and my ending side are exactly the same, the middle has to be the same also. Right? So I'm using some of my investigation skills to go, all right, it has to be the same. Good? When we talk about premature complexes, it means something came in before it was supposed to. So if these are my QRS complexes all the way through, and this blue is my caliper. So I'm calipering it all the way through, and I was supposed to have one come in here, but it came in early, then I would call it a premature beat. That's what's meant by premature. It came in before it was supposed to have come in. So I say it's premature.
Yet, everything marches out afterwards, comparing it to before, as opposed to everything before marches out, and then the premature one comes in, and you start a new
It depends.
caliper line.
Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. If that does happen, then it means that whatever caused this is different than what was causing these. It's possible that this comes in prematurely, that then resets everything that happens after that too. And we'll discuss how to name those when we have them. We might see a pattern emerge on these premature beats. So it could be that we're looking at a rhythm strip and we're going, okay, this looks like crap, this looks like crap, this looks like crap. I'm thinking these ones are all the ones that they're supposed to be. I've got to do some investigation on that. And what I note is that I really should have one here each time. It's coming in early, and so I have an early beat after every single normal beat. You'll identify what's normal because you'll start to get familiar with what normal should look like compared to what abnormal is. So I note the abnormal ones are coming in early each time, and it's after every single normal beat. So it's every second beat is an abnormal beat. So we actually call that bigeminy. We have a name for it. If it comes in every third beat, so these are the same as these, and these are coming in regularly, this one's coming in early, this one's coming in early, and this is the same as that one, but different than all the rest of them, then we would say it's every third beat. We call it trigeminy. We go up to as much as quadrigeminy, every fourth. So we might say bigeminy, trigeminy, or quadrigeminy if it's patterned like that. And then after that, we don't keep track of, in medical terminology, we don't keep track of it. We would just say frequent premature beats.
So just looking at those lines,
Yeah.
the only difference really is that you have arbitrarily decided that you're going to color a section differently.
No. You would also note that this is the same as this, but not the same as those.
So you're way too different.
But those are the same.
And the distance.
And,
That's what you-
and that's what we're looking at, right? In this particular one, that's what we're looking at. And we would note based on our knowledge of EKG that this is the normal one, and this is the abnormal one.
And the
But
distance.
you'll learn how to do that. Same thing here, these are the same, but different than these, but these are all the same.
And the spacing between the first two on the second line, and the third and fourth one are the same.
Correct, yes.
So you're gonna tell us later why the red ones are, the
Yes.
ones that are crap. So I'm
Correct.
confused why those ones are crap, and
Yep.
the black ones aren't. Okay,
Yep, we'll discuss that, each of the premature beats.
okay.
So just because on the bigeminy one or even the trigeminy, if you were to march out the first two, is the distance between 1 and 2 the same as 3 and 4? Or should there have been a 1, 2, and then another marched out? Did it reset itself is what it looks like to me.
No, these are not the same.
I'm talking,
This distance right here is not the same as that distance right there. In this particular example, sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. But it doesn't have to be. Whatever's causing this premature beat to fire, whatever it is that's causing that premature beat to fire is a wrongness in the heart. And it's not ectopic. Well, it is ectopic because it's coming from a different place, yes. But it's premature. How am I doing? Chav's experiencing them right now. I note that because I see what he's got in front of him.
Caffeine.
Right? You go and you drink your coffee, you're gonna experience some of these premature beats. Because caffeine does that to the heart. Caffeine instigates excitability in some of the cells of the heart.
That's why I always have an arrhythmia when I plug it in.
Right? There are other things that might do it.
You just may have an
Maybe
issue
you're having a
there,
really
man.
hard time getting your poop out of your body and you're squeezing really hard and you have a Valsalva maneuver.
Been there.
In the process of doing that, you're gonna have some beats that come in prematurely,
Wasn't great.
right?
Tearing sensations, no.
Someone say turn?
Is that a fistula?
Escape complexes are those ones that come after they're supposed to. So when I caliper this out, I should have had one there, but it didn't, it came in there. We call that an escape complex. It came later. So we have premature or escape are the ways that we refer to that. Right? And those escape complexes can come from anywhere as well. It just depends on what's causing it, right? We'll discuss what some of those things are. And as I talked about over here, the 4 different areas that we can have rhythms that generate from, they can be sinus, atrial, from the junction, or from the ventricles.
Technically, does the junction have a little tail that comes down? Got it. Thank
So,
you.
if I were doing that more accurately, I would just call it junction.
Okay.
And that is also the way that we will name our rhythms. All of your rhythm interpretations will begin with either sinus, atrial, junctional, or ventricular. And you'll have adjectives that go along with those. That's the noun, and you'll have the adjectives that go along with it. Right? So I might have a normal sinus rhythm. I might have a ventricular tachycardia. I might have an accelerated junctional rhythm. I might have atrial fibrillation. They all start with one of those 4 rhythmogenic descriptors that defines where it's coming from. Good? Okay, so back to that. We get rid of the crap, we identify the rhythm, establish the rate, find out what the P waves, PR intervals, and QRS are doing. With that information right there, we can name the rhythm. That's all you need. With that information, you have enough information to determine what the rhythm is. Then you'll go back and look at what all the crap might be and start adding that in. And the crap within a rhythm might be a premature beat, might be an escape beat, it might be a missing beat or a block, it might be changes in the cardiac cycle itself, so a segment that's not where it's supposed to be. The PR segment is above or below the baseline, the ST segment is above or below the baseline. It might be an additional wave that's not supposed to be there, like a U wave. That's all crap, because that's not normal. So we add that in after we give our rhythm interpretation. So our total interpretation is the rhythm identification, which under almost all, except for just a couple of circumstances, should include the words sinus, atrial, junctional, or ventricular. Okay? And then the word with, and then everything else you found in the rhythm that is outside what normal should be. Make sense? Questions on that? Great. Get out a piece of paper or have a piece of paper that you're not going to turn in. Just a scratch piece of paper. I want you to draw something.
No, not this paper. I'm not ripping that out.
Thank you.
I'll take it. Why not?
I'll take two.
That'd be easier to draw on
I
this.
got two.
So many pens in here.
Using this information right here, to the best of your ability, draw, or if you really suck terribly at drawing, you could try to describe a little bit, or draw with descriptors if you want to. But what would happen if you had a rhythm, okay? You have a rhythm where absolutely nothing has happened to the SA node. The SA node is normal and doing its job. Okay? That's number one parameter. SA node is normal and doing its job, but the moment the SA node finishes its job, what's its job?
To send a
Tracking
signal.
issues.
What's its job?
Sending a signal.
To send a signal. So the minute that the SA node has depolarized and is sending its signal through gap junctions out, right there, there's a block. And that block happened after the third normal beat. You had 3 beats, then that happened, and it only happened for the duration of 1 beat, and then something else happened afterwards. And I'm really interested in what happens afterwards.
So every third beat.
Yep, so
There's a
here's what I want. I want you to draw 5 real cardiac cycles on your paper with the information that I just also said. So after the third time that the SA node fired, the signal immediately was blocked and couldn't go any further than the SA node. And I want you to draw all the way through what it would look like before and after that.
Signal there.
It was only blocked for the duration of
Just one time. The SA node was blocked one time. So let me say it a different way. Let me give you the assignment a different way. I want you to draw 6 firings of the SA node, and after the third time, it was blocked. But not after the 4th and 5th, and not after the 1st and 2nd. And really, I want to know what's going to happen after that third time. I'm very interested in what you think is going to happen after that third time. What the difference is in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th, for example, if there is a difference. And I want you to draw the entire cardiac cycle, so P wave, QRS, and T wave.
You said after the third time?
I want you to draw 6 firings of the SA node in complete cardiac cycles. How's that today? Pretty good.
That's just my drawing abilities.
Can't seem to remember my Castle branch login. I got it for this shot.
Contact Castle Branch and have them email you. You're waiting to see what Marlene replies. We send it to both. Oh, perfect.
Usually you need to do delaying response.
If your drawing doesn't show it, I want you to make sure you're noting things like P to P intervals and R to R intervals and what they're going to be.
And we're gonna pretend they're identical. I'm gonna say they're identical. Exactly.
I don't know, are they?
Yeah.
That's up to you to make that determination on whether or not you think they are or not.
Supposed to be, maybe wrong.
Okay, after you have that drawn and you kind of have what you think is happening under these circumstances, find a friend and just see if you agree with what they think is happening.
So is that going to be,
Try to drop QRS.
would it drop or would the AB or the junction, would there just be a,
No, nothing, like no P wave.
right, no P wave, but then the QRS pops in?
That's what I thought. I give it a PVC.
I'm pretty sure all of
PVC?
them.
Yeah, because there's.
But why would it come early?
This is my thought process. I didn't say it would necessarily become early.
Well, PVC would be a premature ventricular contraction.
Ventricular contraction. So what I guess I was saying, there's a ventricular contraction that happens by itself because the ventricular's fired by itself. But
Go to a different table or a different section and say the same thing.
Is blocked, but then another atrial pacemaker is going to take over. And so the depolarization of the atria will still continue. We will still have a P wave. However, because it's coming from a different pacemaker, it'll have a different morphology. And because it's not coming from the SA node, it's coming from another place that would be closer to the junction, the PR interval would be shorter. So different morphology of P wave, shorter PR interval, same QRS complex.
Okay, so if that's the case, what do you have to assume is happening then?
You would have to assume that there's another atrial pacemaker that's
Okay.
willing to work.
Good, and you have to assume that that pacemaker is what?
Distal to
Yeah, then you have to assume that it's closer to the,
No?
So the way I understood that question is I thought you said there was a block after the SA node.
I did?
Okay. So my understanding is that the SA node would still fire,
Correct.
it would hit the block, it would go around it through the muscle, and then hit the track again and continue on the track.
so
Depending on how long the delay was between when it re-hit the track, there might be another firing, and then they'd kind of hit, or the other one would catch it, and then it would continue on.
so dip in
Good
the
theory. Others? You have something different?
Yeah.
I thought that we wouldn't have a P wave. We just have a longer space until the AV fired, and then we'd have our QRS, and then it would come back online.
Okay, so you think that you're gonna have an AV escape of some sort?
Yeah.
Okay, others?
I gave a complete arrest for the duration of the P to P interval,
And then what?
and then resume up normal.
So what would it look like? Explain to me what it would look like.
You've got,
So explain to me the cycle before, the missing cycle you just mentioned, and the cycle after.
so you have a normal T wave,
Okay?
and then you have the refractory period, and then the SA node fires and is arrested, but according to that diagram, that's still a flat line.
Okay?
So you're on your isoelectric line. That continues for the duration of the cardiac cycle till the next P wave would be cued, in which case the block is removed, the SA node fires, the AV receives it, the atria contracts, and your cardiac cycle
Okay, so
continues.
let me ask you a couple questions.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the cycle before the flat line
Mhm.
and the cycle after the flat line.
Yep,
What do those two things look like?
they're the same.
Okay? Now I want you to take the cycle before the flat line and the cycle before that. What do those look like?
They're the same.
Now I want you to take the cycle after the flat line
Mhm.
and the cycle after that. How do those two compare?
Those are the same.
And now I want you to talk to me about the first and second cycles compared to the fourth and fifth cycles after that flat line.
They are the same.
And Annalise wins the cake. So what she just described was you have SA node firing off the P wave, right? leading to a QRS complex of some sort, leading to a T wave. Leading to the SA node firing. I'm going to do the best I can. Leading to the same P wave, the same QRS complex, the same T wave. Yes?
Yep.
The same duration. SA node fires. But the signal never leaves the entirety of the SA node because as soon as the SA node fires, it was blocked. So therefore it couldn't enter any other cells. So we have a period of flatline that happens. A lot of things can happen during this flatline, but it's only one cardiac cycle. What's the inherent firing rate of the SA node?
40 to 60.
What's the inherent firing rate of the SA
80
node?
to 100.
What's the inherent firing rate of the SA node? What's the inherent firing rate of it?
60 to 100.
What's the inherent firing rate
40
of
to
it?
60.
80 to 100.
I still haven't heard it. What's the inherent firing rate of the SA node? Come on, guys.
90.
What'd you say? 90 to 100. That's the inherent firing rate of the SA node.
The SA
If it's 60, what does it mean is involved? No, what's involved if it's 60? The parasympathetic, that's right. But that's not inherent. Inherent is if I take the heart out of the chest. What is it? What's the next inherent firing rate and where's it coming from? The atrium. What's its inherent firing rate? 60 to 80. That's a lot slower. If you're telling me that within one beat, the atria is probably going to come back in? It probably hasn't reached its, the IF channels probably haven't done anything yet. Before we all of a sudden, so we should have had a P wave, QRS, T wave, and we're right back into the SA node firing right when it's supposed to, right?
Right.
And because the SA node is firing normally, the P wave should be back to normal again. I don't know how long I'm making this. The QRS complex should be back to normal again. The T wave should be back to normal again. And we're still back to normal because we said it only happened once, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Do you understand what we just did? So what just happened? Tell me in as few words as possible what happened here.
You missed a beat.
Okay, tell me in more technical terms.
Escape beat.
Where's the escape beat?
The SA node was
What
blocked.
beat came in after it was supposed to?
Oh, not escape.
The SA
A
node was
drop.
blocked. And
Stop! That's as few words as you need. The SA node was blocked. The SA node was blocked. Is there crap in this rhythm?
Yes.
Yes, where?
In the
Right, we're missing a beat. So let's say that this is that's that rhythm. Those are my boxes on the EKG. So,
big
so
boxes or small
what's the
boxes?
rate? Give me a guesstimate of the rate here.
60.
Okay, so somewhere it's slightly faster, so somewhere just a little bit above 60, yes? And let's say that that's the same as over here, so I have a rate that's slightly above 60. Is everything normal about this?
Yes.
So what's my underlying rhythm?
Sinus.
What kind of a sinus?
Normal sinus.
What's that?
Normal
Yeah, we have
sinus.
a normal sinus rhythm, yes?
Yes.
And do I have crap in this rhythm?
Yes.
Yes, so what do I say after this? With, and what's my crap?
Atrial stents.
They dropped,
Drop this.
blocked SA.
A sinus block. See how easy that was? You have a normal sinus rhythm, that's a sinus block. And we know it's a sinus block because the sinus node happened, but it was blocked after the sinus node. How do we know that the sinus node was blocked and not like destroyed or shut out altogether?
Because it came back on exactly in
It came
time.
back to normal.
Because it's back to normal and
In time, regular.
in time. Because if I do my P to P intervals, right, I should have had one there, but I'm pretending I have one there, right? Because I pretend I
Right.
have good stuff in the crap. And that one came right back where it was supposed to.
And you're agreed.
So I know the SA node could not have been messed up. Otherwise, this would not have come back in time. That make sense?
Yep.
Before you leave, I want you to do one more. I want to ask one more thing. Go ahead.
So I understand that, and I get it now. So I thought there may have been a P wave, but P wave meant that the A2 was polarized, but there was blocked in the junction somewhere.
I was very specific about where I told you it was blocked.
I know that, but mine, I added to it, that's why I'm like wanting to.
Don't add to it. Because you like to answer the questions you want. I want you to do one more. I'm gonna ask something slightly different now. I'm asking the exact same question with one small difference. So I still have 5 cardiac cycles that I want to deal with. We're still dealing with 5 cardiac cycles. The exact same here. Here's the difference though. In this case, I don't know what's going to happen here. You got to tell me what's going to happen here, okay? But in this particular case, instead of the SA node firing and then getting blocked, the SA node itself did not initiate one signal. It fired here, it fired here. Right there, the SA node did not initiate a signal to be blocked. There was no signal that was initiated from the SA node.
And then it goes back online.
And then we're back to cardiac cycles again. So, how might it be different? One time, the SA node did not even initiate a signal.